This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success Podcast. I can't go. That's the band U2 with the song Attached. I think doing a beautiful job of conveying the bond of a strong attachment to another person, and perfect for our topic today, because that's what we're talking about. Attachment styles in relationships and how to figure out yours as well as that of your partner. This is a super important topic, but I think also one that is very much alive in the zeitgeist right now. There's a lot of talk about attachment issues and what they mean, and not all of it is great information. So I hope to dispel some of the myths today and help increase your clarity and confidence and understanding about attachment styles in order to be able to use this awareness for positive things in your life and in your relationship. So I'm glad we're here together today. Thank you so much for joining me. If this is your first time listening to the show, I am Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. I am the founder and clinical director of Growing Self-Counseling and Coaching. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a board-certified coach, and I am the host of this podcast. And I love doing this show for you. My intention of every single episode is to make these really genuinely helpful and valuable for you. So I'm always listening to your questions that come through on Instagram. Sometimes people email us, hello@growingself.com with your questions, and so that I can be sure that I'm creating podcasts that are genuinely helpful to you. So if you have questions or things that you would like to learn more about, please get in touch with me. I would love to hear what's on your mind. And what I have been hearing a lot of lately is how incredibly important your relationships are to you, and understandably so. I mean, our relationships are truly the most important things in our lives in many ways. I mean, having healthy relationships with other people is just so fundamental to having happiness and the life that you want. And when things are not well with our relationships, or when we want more closeness with people than we have, or if we're feeling a lack of love and connection in our lives, it really impacts us on every level. And there is a reason for this. This is not some deficit that, you should be happy by yourself and you aren't. So what's wrong with me? Let's just not even going to bat that away. The truth is that humans are built to bond. It is why we are here. It is essential to our survival from an evolutionary perspective. And attachment is also fundamental to our wellness. That is true for children. Children literally cannot develop properly without secure attachment bonds. Some people experimented with this early in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The powers that be decided that it might be a better idea to take poor children away from their filthy alcoholic parents and put them in hospitals or orphanages, perfectly clean, nice rows of gorgeous sparkling cribs, fed at regular intervals by clean nurses dressed in white and bundled up in identical little swaddles. It all seemed like a good idea. Unfortunately, though, the babies kept dying, and nobody could figure out why until the psychologist and researcher John Bowlby showed up and had the gall to say, maybe it has something to do with their lack of attachment to one consistent caregiver. And everybody sort of scratched their heads and said, oh, okay, maybe. And they revised that policy, thankfully. But attachment in infancy is crucial to literally growth and survival. It is crucial to our developing of psychological health and wellness in very basic ways in early childhood. And it is no less important to us as adults. And the idea that it should be otherwise is very much a myth of Western culture. So I'm just going to take that myth away from you while we're talking, and instead turn our awareness to what attachment attachment really is and how it really works. My hope for this conversation is to help you understand what is normal and also help you understand when there might be signs of real attachment issues so that you can manage them effectively, because you can. So we're rolling into all of it today. So this is a huge topic. We have a lot to talk about. We're probably not going to cover all of the everything about attachment during this conversation today, but broadly, I'd love to give you an understanding of all of this. And let's start by just defining our terms. Like when we talk about attachment styles in relationships, what are we talking about? And so attachment is essentially having a bond with someone, an emotional bond and a psychological bond, and to a degree, believe it or not, a physical bond with someone, in the sense that when we do bond with another person, we experience neurological changes and even hormonal changes. So attachment happens on very deep levels. And when we're talking about attachment styles, we're referring to your signature ways of relating to others. Broadly speaking, there are several different kinds of attachment styles. There are what we think of as a secure attachment style, which is, the ability to have strong, enduring relationships with other people where the core assumptions and the core kind of emotional experience of that relationship is, I am fundamentally okay. I am fundamentally worthy of love and respect. And other people are fundamentally okay and trustworthy. I can connect with someone and feel generally sure that they will treat me well and be nice to me, and I will get my needs met in this relationship, and we're all right. That is the non-scientific way of describing what it feels like to have a secure attachment style. Not that there aren't ups and downs, but that fundamentally, I'm okay and you're okay. So it's important to understand that the attachment kind of style, the way of relating, extends to other people as well as to yourself. I'm okay, you're okay. There are other types of attachment styles that can show up when babies, young children, and even through our lives, have experiences with other important people that teach you otherwise. Either I am not okay and I can't trust you, is where other kind of attachment issues start to show up. And so broadly speaking, there are two other kinds of attachment styles. There is an anxious attachment style, where the core experience with other humans is, I'm not sure that I am okay. I'm not sure that I am worthy of love and respect. And I'm not sure that I can trust you to meet my needs. So what that turns into is a lot of anxiety about relationships. I don't fundamentally know I'm okay, so I need a lot of reassurance from you that I am okay. So I need a lot more like active love than a securely attached person needs in order to feel okay. And I don't trust that you're going to give it to me. So even if you do give it to me, I can't trust it, that it's real. So I need more. And so somebody with a really anxious attachment style never really feels secure in relationships, never really feels loved, and really needs a lot of reassurance and like active love behaviors. You have to say nice things to me and give me lots of compliments and tell me you love me 75 times a day. And if I text you, you have to text me back within 5 seconds. And if you don't, I'm going to be very upset, because what does this mean? So lots of anxiety. And also, in very anxiously attached people, it turns into a lot of controlling behaviors because they really need this from others in order to feel okay and secure. When they don't get it, they tend to get very escalated and very upset. And so you see a lot of control happening in relationships from anxiously attached people who are trying to get their partners to do things in order to help them feel better, essentially. So that is one far end of this attachment spectrum. The other end of this attachment spectrum refers to people with avoidant attachment styles. So similarly, early in life, they had experiences with usually caregivers where they learned, I am not worthy of love and respect, and I cannot trust other people to be safe or meet my needs. Therefore, I am making an executive decision that I no longer need other humans. Other humans are not relevant. They are not important. I am the only person that really exists, that matters. I can only trust myself, and I'm not even going to try to connect with others or think for a moment that my needs will be met by them, because not only will they not be, if I get too close to them, I will be in danger. So I'm just not going to do it at all. And so an avoidant attachment style turns into a fundamental psychological solitude, essentially. I am the only being. Other people are sort of around. I may try to utilize them in order to get my needs met, but without an emotional attachment, because that is not going to end well. So people become very much islands with an avoidant attachment style. Other people aren't safe fundamentally. And so there's also not a desire to attach to other people commonly with people who have very serious attachment issues on the avoidant side of the spectrum. And so what this also looks like in practice is that in relationships with people that do begin to develop some closeness, somebody with a very avoidant attachment style will begin actively rejecting that other person. And these happen at like deep emotional levels that are non-conscious, but what that bubbles up into is a lot of all of the reasons why somebody isn't good enough. So it's a lot of criticism, it's a lot of comparison, it's a lot of focusing on somebody's negative characteristics, all the reasons why they're not going to be a good partner, and really kind of talking themselves out of a relationship because fundamentally they feel uneasy being close to other people. And so they rationalize it. So somebody with an avoidant attachment style will usually have a series of fairly short-lived relationships, and they will either find ways to end those relationships, kind of breaking up with people, and it is always the other person's fault, by the way. Or there can be a lot of like cheating behaviors, because in their minds, they're not in a relationship anyway. The other person is not that important to them. And there are all these other people that they could be hanging out with. So, hey, why not? And so it can look like the sort of indiscriminate attachment. Superficial kind of bonds with other people, but nobody is like really important, is what that can kind of look like. So these attachment styles, as you are inferring, can have major issues on the health of your relationships. If you have a very pronounced attachment style in one of these directions or another, it's going to be global. If you have an avoidant attachment style, it's going to show up in every relationship with your significant other, with your family, with your boss, and vice versa. So it's very powerful stuff. And it's important to know this about yourself if you have these tendencies in every single situation, because this stuff has to be managed or you are going to blow out of every relationship, right? Through no fault of your own. Like you didn't make this happen. It was the hand you got dealt and it's crappy and it's yours to deal with. And again, it can be managed by understanding it. And it is also true that there are attachments and attachment styles and attachment experiences that happen in relationships that can feel like these, and to a degree, and they are very, very normal behaviors. Truly. And again, while the attachment issues are very significant, either if you see them in yourself or if you are trying to have a relationship with somebody who has very significant attachment issues, it's real. But the thing that's happening right now that I think is so interesting is people are self-diagnosing or diagnosing their partners with attachment issues without a full awareness of like the normal spectrum of what this looks like and how attachment always works in every relationship. And so I think a great example of this, I sometimes get asked to provide, expert opinions or whatever. With journalists will like reach out and ask for commentary. And so I had this one very nice girl reach out not too long ago. She was working on a piece for a publication about attachment styles and relationships. And could I, provide some insight? Like, yeah, sure. And so we're talking with each other about, attachment and kind of secure versus anxious, avoidant. And as we were speaking, she was like, I'm pretty sure I have disorganized attachment style. Like I'm anxious and avoidant in relationships. And I heard that was like, oh, really? Tell me more. And she's like, yeah, sometimes, just when I'm with people, sometimes I worry about how they feel about me. But then sometimes I wonder if I really want to be with them anyway. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure I have disorganized attachment style. I was like, okay. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, unless you were raised in an orphanage staffed by Satanists, I don't think you have disorganized attachment style. Like it's very rare and it is very profound and it is associated with like really serious like early childhood and abuse and neglect and abandonment and certainly like that exists, right? I mean, people do end up in foster care and live through, terrible neglect and drug addicted parents, like all those things happen. But even then, like, if babies have even just enough, like somebody in their lives who is good enough, they can achieve so much resilience and so much health. But so what I came to understand through talking with this journalist and what has also come out in conversations with clients is that I think what's happening is that people are learning about attachment styles, anxious attachment styles and avoidant attachment styles, and doing the same thing that I and the rest of my classmates did in our first year of counseling school, where we read the DSM and basically diagnosed ourselves with everything in it and started handing out diagnoses liberally to friends and family. And it's because with things of a psychological nature, we can see instances of these things in ourselves. And if you have just enough information to be dangerous, it is very easy to make kind of sweeping statements about yourself and others that are not just inaccurate, they're also not helpful. And here's the irony. Doing that too much can also create issues in your relationships. If both you and your partner are completely fine, have secure attachment styles, but if you are interpreting either your or their behavior as being in some way pathological and then kind of going off to the races in that direction, that will also cause problems. So I want to unpack this a little bit more with you. So what ended up happening with this journalist, and also happens usually with clients at some point during our sessions, I do begin drawing weird pictures. And with this journalist, the weird picture that I drew was one of a bell curve. And I don't know if you've ever encountered a bell curve in any, statistics classes, but essentially if you visualize a hill with, it's higher in the middle and on each side, it kind of slopes down. And what we do with these hills, these bell curves, is it's kind of a visual representation of normal distributions of things. And so when it comes to attachment and secure attachment, imagine that the middle of the hill is fairly broad and everybody in like that highest middle part of the hill has a secure attachment style. There is no exact center. There is no perfectly, securely attached human. We can all kind of trend towards one side or the other based on our normal life experiences, but due to the culture of our families, or just some things, we can kind of have a natural tendency towards being a little bit more attached or a little more avoidant, and still be very much within that normal spectrum. And then when we start to get to the edges of the hill and start to slope down on one side or the other, this is where attachment issues begin to be more pronounced. They're both on a spectrum. So you can go from that normal secure attachment to slightly anxious attachment. And as we continue sloping further down the hill and we kind of get to that tippy end, that is where you'll find severe attachment issues. And it represents a very small part of the population. So most people are somewhere in that secure spectrum. Whatever happened with their caregivers or early life experiences was good enough. Does not have to be perfect. It has to be good enough. When we start getting to the sides of the hill, it means that there, were some non-ideal things that left tendencies either towards avoidance or towards attachment, much more rare in terms of a percentage of the population. And then at the very tippy ends of the slopes were those serious attachment issues that I was describing for you earlier on the show, where people fundamentally have serious issues in their relationships where they cannot feel safe and secure with other people. They're very anxious. They become very controlling and demanding. Or on the other side, they are avoidant to the extent that they essentially block any efforts at attachment. So those, again, are rare and are associated with serious things. And I've had clients who do have those more severe kinds of attachment issues. And every single time it has been associated with things like being in foster care in infancy, being raised by addicted or mentally ill parents who were not functional enough to meet children's needs consistently. So if you are curious to know if your life experience is kind of consistent with that serious attachment injuries, you might consider taking the ACEs questionnaire. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experience Scale, I think. Anyway, Google it, and it has, a number of questions. And if you have a relatively high ACEs score, it means that you have had fairly extensive adverse childhood experiences, trauma experiences that would be consistent with those kinds of attachment disorders. And if that is the case and you're having these consistent issues in relationships, my sincere and heartfelt advice is that you take this to a psychologist, a very good, qualified, licensed therapist. You could see a clinical psychologist. A licensed marriage and family therapist will also have specialized training and education in attachment styles to be able to work with you on some of these things. And for the rest of us, we're somewhere on that spectrum, right? And so why this matters is because the other thing that happens that confuses people is that, again, going back to the very first thing we talked about, because we humans are built to bond, we have hardwired machinery essentially in our brains and in our bodies that create attachments to people, whether we want them to or not. I mean, if we spend a lot of time with a person and kind of, have a trajectory towards particularly a romantic relationship, you will develop attachment bonds. And one of the things that's important to know is that these bonds are created and maintained at non-conscious levels. They are related to human survival drives. Our ability to attach and bond to other humans is as fundamental to life, human life continuing, as like feeding yourself and not freezing to death from an evolutionary perspective. because humans are a collective species. We would not have survived out in the wild without being in tribes, in groups of people who were connected to each other, loyal to each other. And these were often groups based around family bonds, kinship bonds. And then certainly when it comes to the attachment bonds that parents have to their children and that partners have to each other, it gets even stronger. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense from an evolutionary perspective because a parent cannot walk away from an infant. That infant would die. Similarly, partners. I mean, if there's a couple that has had a child together and it's 100,000 years ago, the female and the infant are going to be highly dependent on the male, or I don't know, maybe depending on the culture of the tribe, it was the other way around. But there's so much energy that goes into raising human babies. People literally cannot do it alone. And so the attachment bonds that people formed with each other held them together. Even when things got hard, even when there's a drought or a famine or a war, I'm not going to leave you. Because if people were left, if people were abandoned, that's it. It's lights out, right? So these bonds exist in humans the same way that they exist in animals. You know, have you ever seen those documentaries with like a mother bear and her little bear cubs and the mom is trying to like take care of the babies? Same thing. And these are very, very, very old, deep parts of your brain that are older and deeper than the part of your brain that is conscious. It's only the outermost layer of our brains, a new part of our brains that have conscious thoughts. They visualize things. They think in words. They think into the future. They can make sort of interpretive associations or have creative ideas. That is the very outermost layer of your brain. And that is what, separates humans from animals. So we have that sitting on the surface, but the rest of our brains, the inside, is still very much that old mammalian brain. And that is the part of your brain where attachments are formed and maintained. There are some things that are a little bit different with human attachments, obviously, but it's important to understand that these are just so deep and so powerful, and they are baked into the machinery. So, I don't know how many of you listening have been pregnant before, but I remember when I had my first baby and was pregnant, I was fascinated by all of these things that my body was just kind of automatically doing that I had no idea it could do, like all this stuff just sort of like going on autopilot and things happening. And it's like, I was built for this. My body was designed and it knows exactly what to do in order to create another human. And there were all these little mysterious, like architectures and things that sprang into life when it was time to grow a child, right? And the same is true for your brain. You have structures in your brain. You have hormones that get activated, neurotransmitters that get activated when we develop attachment bonds. And interestingly, and I've shared this in other podcasts, particularly related to why it can be so difficult to end a relationship, like some of the breakup recovery podcasts I've done, is that there is evidence to suggest that the parts of your brain responsible for those attachment bonds are the same parts of your brain that have opioid receptors and dopamine receptors. And so when we think about becoming addicted to like illegal substances, so heroin or cocaine or whatever, the reason why people can get addicted to those illegal substances is because those drugs use the parts of your brain that nature originally developed to bond to other people. They essentially hijack it. And so I think that's very interesting and also important to know that bonding process is a natural, healthy, normal, addictive bonding process, but is just as powerful. So biology aside, the reason why it's important to understand how fundamentally just human this is because attachment bonds happen in every single relationship. And so so in the example of two, securely attached people who get together and they have a nice relationship, and generally speaking, they feel comfortable being close to each other. They aren't terribly preoccupied about their partner, worried about things. They will, if their relationship becomes distressed, have these attachment kind of flare-ups because our attachment bonds mobilize in efforts to restore kind of balance or equilibrium in a relationship. So for example, if you are married to a nice person, you're having a nice time, and something changes. I don't know, maybe you had a child, and now all of a sudden, who's taking out the trash or getting up with a baby is more fraught than it was, right? The totally normal and expected. But what can happen is that people can experience these kinds of relational problems as a threat to their attachment bond. You're leaving me with all this housework. You're not getting up with a baby. On an emotional level, it turns into, don't you love me? Don't you still care about me? And when these attachment bonds are threatened, all this emotional machinery flares into life. And what happens is that partner will kind of move towards the anxious end of the spectrum and say, hey, why aren't you doing this? Where are you? I need you to do these things. And please help me with this. They become elevated, can sometimes even become aggressive in pursuit of getting their needs met because they're trying to restore equilibrium into their relationship. On the other side of this, same situation, nice, secure relationship. And all of a sudden, one of the partners is now experiencing their formerly calm, kind, generally loving partner as being aggravated with them, snappy with them, frustrated with them. And on an emotional level, their attachment becomes threatened. It turns into, oh, I am not safe with this person anymore. I need to kind of keep away, move away, distance. And that will sometimes turn into disengagement, defensiveness, kind of, inner narratives around, oh, you're just being ridiculous. It's not that big of a deal. That is reminiscent of someone with an avoidant attachment style. And so that is also efforts to kind of maintain equilibrium in a relationship. And this is very common. I would struggle to think of a couple that I've ever seen over my, decades-long career as a marriage counselor who was in a distressed relationship and coming in for help and who was not having an attachment bond kind of flare up as a result of it. The most common combination we see is a pursue withdraw kind of orientation where one person is aggravated, angry, semi-hostile, accusatory, and the other person is withdrawn or avoidant in response to that. So this pursue withdraw kind of round and round the thing, not fun, but very normal, because the pursuing partner is feeling anxious in the relationship and is trying to get their needs met from their partner through outreach that can often be angry and can often sort of come across as being controlling, right? And nobody starts this, and it's nobody's fault. And a normal behavior is to kind of withdraw in response to somebody who you're experiencing as threatening or critical or kind of out to get you. And vice versa, if you are in a relationship with somebody where you aren't getting your needs met, they aren't behaving in ways that make you feel loved and respected, the very normal and natural response to that is to say, what the heck? Are we still doing this? Are you still there? And so the reason why I wanted to get into this a little bit is because these patterns are very, very common in relationships and have nothing to do with anybody being fundamentally, securely, or avoidantly attached when they show up. Two people standing at the tippy-top center of that hill in any kind of relational distress will always start to fall onto one side or another with each other. And you can also have different experiences in different relationships. You can be in a relationship with one person who is maybe a little quieter or shut down or did not speak your love language, and it made you start to feel a little bit anxious. You will begin to have anxiously attached tendencies in that relationship as a result of your reactions to that particular partner. And in a different relationship, you might be with somebody who's coming on a little strong, who wants to spend more time talking than you do, who maybe wants to have sex more than you do, wants to spend all their time together. And you'll be like, yeah, I think I need to see some other friends right now, or okay, it's a lot, no more talking. It could even be like an introversion, extroversion thing. I mean, there could be all kinds of reasons why there can be these sorts of differences. But in response to that person, you're going to try to regain equilibrium by pulling away a little bit from them. And so if you think back on your life experience with different people that you've been around and can observe yourself kind of showing up differently in different relationships, that's why our relationships are systems, which means that we react to other people, and then those other people react to us. And so this is why, relationships and couples counseling honestly can get so complex, is because there's this interplay of attachment, potentially attachment styles, but also like attachment responses and understanding these systems, right? And the way that people relate to each other. And so that is why, like a marriage and family therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist will be able to understand all of these systemic pieces. Whereas if you go to couples counseling for a regular therapist, either an LPC or just a psychologist who doesn't have that systemic training, and they will, look at both of you sitting in their office and be like, oh, well, you're avoidantly attached and you're anxiously attached. And you guys are now, I can't believe you found each other. What are the odds? But there's this tendency to kind of look at individual psychology as opposed to that systems psychology. And what winds up happening is that one or both of you gets pathologized, and it turns into being about your issues as opposed to understanding that dance that you two are doing together so that you can resolve it together, which is what a marriage and family therapist does. So, just as an aside, if you are going to see couples counseling, look for a licensed marriage and family therapist. But back to the attachment piece. So the other thing that can happen here with attachment stuff is that when people don't really understand how significant and severe, very real, like attachment issues are, they can look at the experiences that they are having in their relationship, either how they are feeling in their relationship currently or how they are experiencing their partner. And they can also begin to label and pathologize these the same way that if you went for couples counseling with a clinical psychologist who may have had one class in couples, theory and techniques, there's a tendency to begin pointing the finger. So if you are with a partner who is withdrawing, who is uncommunicative, who is not responding to you the way that you want them to, and you read some article or see somebody dancing on TikTok talking about avoidant attachment styles, it's like, oh, my partner has an avoidant attachment style. That's what's wrong. And ironically, what that turns into is, first of all, a lack of awareness of how your partner might be experiencing you that is leading them to kind of avoid and move away, and experience you as being more hostile and critical because now you're pointing your finger and calling them avoidantly attached and you're broken psychologically, whatever. And so it's really to the detriment of relationships to pathologize our partners in this way, or vice versa, to be in a relationship with somebody who wants more love and affection and attention than you've been giving them. And if you read a little bit of pop psychology, you might want to label them as having an anxious attachment style, which then gives you permission to basically invalidate everything they say next because you've already decided that they have broken attachment styles and they're just being ridiculous. So you don't have to change anything about your behavior in this relationship because it's not your problem. It's their problem because they have an anxious attachment style. Again, not helpful. If this is a relationship that you are interested in keeping, it's important to understand systemically what people do in relationships in response to each other that involves these signature attachment styles in relationships. Now, of course, it is also possible that you are actually connected to somebody who has had adverse childhood experiences that has resulted in non-ideal attachment styles. And if that's the case, also just be cautious and understand that these things exist on a spectrum, that nobody is perfectly secure or avoidant or anxious. Again, other people might seem different than you based on cultural factors or what was normal in their family, which might be different than yours. And also that there's a wide variety of secure in the middle, on the top of that hill there. So give people the benefit of the doubt. And if you are experiencing somebody as being avoidant or attached in their interactions with you, it's okay to have a conversation about that. I listened to this podcast about attachment styles and I realized we might be doing this thing together. You can get somebody to listen to this podcast with you and say, I feel like we're doing this. I feel like you might have sort of anxious tendencies with me and I can feel myself kind of stepping back from you. And I wonder what we can do to both help each other feel more stable and secure again. Because again, all that means when people start behaving this way is that they're not feeling secure in their relationship. Either they're experiencing danger that they need to move away of, or they're experiencing a lack that they need to pull out of their partner, right? And so just to be able to have a conversation like that, I feel like we're probably doing this with each other and I'd like to get back to center again. What would help you feel safer and more secure with me? And to have a conversation about that. Now, of course, if this has been going on for a while in a relationship and, bad feelings have been happening as a result, what you will also see is that people, their core narratives about each other start to change. It turns into always, never kind of language. She is always complaining. I can never do enough. She's never satisfied. She has unrealistic expectations. It's fundamental to her character. Or he is just unloving. He's dense. He has zero empathy. I think he might have Asperger's. He's incapable of loving me the way I need to be loved. It turns into these like global kinds of narratives that we hold about each other. And that is a serious danger sign in a relationship, and one of the key indicators that it is time to get in front of a competent marriage counselor quickly, because if that goes unchecked, that'll snowball into a lot of disconnection. The on-ramp to this is often just having those interactions with each other where these attachment styles are being expressed. Like people don't get to that core narrative without having had experiences with that person over and over and over again that teach you he will not understand how I'm feeling. He doesn't have any empathy for me. Why try? I'm just going to give up, right? That there's a long on-ramp to that. So just be aware of that. And now, very lastly, on the subject of those attachment styles in relationships, I will also say that if you believe that you are in a relationship with somebody or that you yourself are kind of on one side of that hill or another, so either an anxious attachment style as evidenced by, consistently worrying about how not just this partner, but all your partners feel about you, whether or not you're loved, looking to specific behaviors to confirm whether or not you're loved. And if you aren't getting those behaviors, feeling really bad and upset. needing a lot of reassurance and kind of safety seeking in your relationships, one thing you might do, if you scroll back through my podcast feed, I did a podcast about trust issues in relationships. So you might want to check that out. But also recognizing that, well, and the other side too. So if you or your partner are on the other side of kind of an avoidant attachment style, so the other side of the hill. So there's a lot of distancing from people, a lot of criticism of other people, a lot of ambivalence about relationships, like not quite sure I want to be here with you. Are you really good enough for me? I don't know. So like hot and cold kinds of things. If you or your partner are either of those, the first step is achieving awareness that that's a thing. It's global, and breaking the idea that you're only feeling this way because of this specific person. So if you have real attachment issues, it will be global. It will show up in all of your relationships, not just the one that you are in currently. So that's kind of the big sign. And then also it's important to understand that just like people are harmed in relationships, that attachment machinery can change in response to what we experienced in very early infancy and childhood, and also through relational trauma later in life, I should add, not to the same extent, but okay, probably too much information. Just like how people are wounded in relationships, people are also healed in relationships. And so the best thing that you can do if you have an, anxious tending attachment style or an avoidant tending attachment style is to be in a healthy relationship with a person who is somewhere in the middle. Somebody who has a secure attachment style will be able to kind of, ride the waves and the ups and downs of life with somebody who has anxious or avoidant tendencies and kind of help restore equilibrium. They will not be as reactive, and it will be an emotionally safer relationship. Although you can take the most securely attached person in the world and put them in a relationship with an anxiously attached person, they will exhibit avoidant tendencies in response, and vice versa. The most perfectly securely attached person in the world, match them with somebody who has an avoidant attachment style, and they will become anxious in that relationship with that person in efforts to kind of restore that emotional equilibrium. But recognizing this and working towards achieving a healthy, secure relationship with that person will not just, feel better for everybody, but it will also be very healing. You might want to check a podcast that I recorded a while ago now with one of my colleagues, Dr. Page here at Growing Self, who specializes in relational trauma and talking about the power of healing relationships, so that even if you did have negative experiences early in life, and you might always feel a little anxious or a little, ambivalent about people as a result, if you understand that about yourself and create a healthy, healing relationship with a partner, you will have corrective emotional experiences that essentially retrain your mind, retrain your body, retrain that really deep attachment bonding place in your brain that other humans are okay. They can fundamentally be trusted, and that you are fundamentally okay. You are worthy of love and respect. You are good, and you can expect generally good things from other people too. When you have those experiences over and over and over again, no matter what stage of life you're in, it is fundamentally healing, and you deserve to have that. Healing relationships are key. I would invite you to go back and check out the podcast on healing relationships. And also, if this is an area where you'd like to work on yourself, I would strongly suggest that you get connected with a really good therapist who can help you unpack all of this, uncover the blind spots, and help you gain the self-awareness that we talked about so much during this episode. Very lastly, there is another resource that I have for you on a previous podcast where we addressed attachment styles in relationships. I did a attachment style quiz that is really more of like a self-assessment and almost like a mini workbook. It's totally free, but if you want to check it out, you can text 55444 and then text the word attach, I'm embarrassing myself now. ATTACH, attach to 55444. Anyway, and you'll get an email with this activity that I created for you. It is a series of questions that isn't like, some trite, true, false. Oh, this is your attachment score. It's really more complex. And so it'll invite you to walk through like some journaling questions. You'll have some prompts to like reflect on your experiences growing up, some of those core assumptions. And I designed it to help you gain some awareness around those old patterns in yourself. So it's a useful tool. If you have a therapist, you could certainly show it with them and do it with them. It might even be something interesting for you and your partner to do together if this is something that you're working on together as a couple, provided that you can have emotionally safe conversations about it together. But anyway, it's a nice, set of activities that can help you get clarity, but also even, I don't want to oversell it. You're not going to resolve attachment issues just by participating in the activity, but it will get the ball rolling. So there's that. Again, you can text 55444 to text that number and then just type in the word attach and you'll get the link to the activity. Okay, that is all for now. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope it was helpful to you, and I will talk to you soon on another episode. I'll be back next week. All right, bye-bye.